This is a reading of The Fundamentals of Esoteric Knowledge by Jean Dubuis, with the express written permission from Portae Lucis, the estate that handles all of Jean Dubuis' work. Lesson 1. Introduction. When we founded the association, the Philosophers of Nature, no organization accessible to the public was in existence, at least in France, that clarified or disocculted esoteric disciplines such as alchemy and Kabbalah. However, since esoteric and philosophical groups have been in existence for quite a long time, we assumed that the individuals who chose to join us had a certain amount of esoteric background and knowledge. However, as time passed, it became obvious that, even though a number of LPN members had spent a greater or lesser amount of time in such groups, most did not have the esoteric knowledge we assumed they had when we wrote the lessons. The present class, Fundamentals of Esoteric Knowledge, is an effort to remedy the situation. This class comprises 12 lessons which deal with the following subjects. Number 1. Basic esoteric principles and general principles of social and human behavior. 2. Creation, the macrocosm, nature. 3. Creation, the microcosm, man. 4. Passive symbolism. 5. Active symbolism, the word. 6. Numbers and cycles. 7. Meditation, prayer, ritual. 8. Powers. 9. The secret sciences. 10. Universal justice. 11. The 7 commandments of the Fama Fraternitatis. And 12. Service in the invisible order. It was our intention that this class should last for 12 months only, and not for years. Therefore, it may seem very concentrated at times. This difficulty will promptly disappear with the work which consists in rereading the content of the lessons often, and in actually performing the exercises which are suggested. The goal of the class is not to pass on to you a mini encyclopedia of esoteric knowledge, but to provide a basis, a springboard towards the individual inner path. For this reason, apart from the material on the cultural aspects of esotericism, the class offers a personal method of initiation that strives to detach itself from ancient or modern egregores. This method, which includes meditation exercises, is based on a numeric and geometric symbolism of a universal nature, which, as a matter of fact, renders it less prone to the sway of the various egregores. This condition assists the student in acquiring the necessary inner freedom. Whoever takes this class and does not wish to undertake the proposed initiatory work is free to act as he pleases. The present lesson develops a knowledge which is neither alchemical nor Kabbalistic, but which is in accordance with the knowledge coming from many years of operative work in these disciplines and others. This class won't deal with a specific discipline, except in the case of examples. Let's also specify that we cannot avoid presenting elements which already exist in the other classes or in articles of the newsletters, Les Petites Philosophies de la Nature, or The Stone. It should be noted that the concepts developed in this class are essentially of Western origin and more specifically Mediterranean. While you study, do not lose sight of the fact that there are 2 complementary esoteric aspects. The intellectual aspect, which permits us to sow seeds into the unconscious, and the inner aspect, which is the source of the knowledge coming to us. This knowledge can only be transmitted through the path said to be of the heart, in quotes. There are 2 tools to be used in the study of esotericism, the brain and the heart. The brain sows, the heart harvests. Ora et labora. Out of unity you arise. The return to unity is your destiny. The mind discovers the path of return, while the heart provides the key to each stage along the way. Dear friend, basic esoteric principles. What is esotericism? What do we mean by esoteric? This is the first point we need to examine. Etymologically, this word means inner, or that which is reserved for the adepts, for those inside, as opposed to what is public, what is done outside, and therefore is exoteric. However, this is clearly an insufficient definition to provide you with a satisfactory idea of the esoteric reality. As we do not wish to use an a priori definition, we should agree right at the beginning that it is impossible to define this term at this time, because the esoteric experience which transforms an a priori definition into personally experienced knowledge cannot be offered at the beginning of the initiatory path. Glimpses of the origin of the being. It is impossible to be a student and later an esoteric adept without accepting, in the beginning, several axioms. The truth of these axioms is progressively unveiled through inner contacts. The first point: the absolute is the origin of the whole. The second point: the essence of the absolute is the source of man. The third point: the whole manifestation only has one aim: to make out of zero, which is the seed of man in the absolute, the infinite. Starting with the absolute, the hierarchy of forces and energies in a descending order is as follows: being, consciousness, life, matter. The being issues from the void and creates consciousness. As soon as consciousness is, it creates life for its own need for evolution. Life creates matter as a field for the experiments it needs to conduct. These points will be developed later. The interest in esotericism. If you're interested in esotericism, it's because you feel a certain inner yearning, a certain necessity to understand things and to understand yourself. This yearning indicates that you've passed the initiation of the nadir, the moment when involution leads you to the densest point of matter. See Lesson 3. This search for knowledge, for a coherent understanding of the world, cannot be satisfied by science or religion. Therefore, we turn to esoteric disciplines in the hope of finding the answer to our inner quest, which is more or less unconscious when it first arises. In effect, and you can verify this, esotericism leads step by step to an experiential certitude, to a coherent and satisfactory knowledge of the world. In the beginning, however, you need a freely given faith and trust as the driving elements of your work. This faith gradually disappears to be replaced in turn by knowledge. Be very cautious while you move in the domain of faith, because, while it can be a motivating force in the beginning, it can also lead you to accept inconsistent ideas and the worst superstitions. Physical consciousness and superconsciousness. In the esoteric sciences, regardless of your choice of discipline, each must find his own truth by breaking through one's inner barriers. In the profane world, man's psyche is divided into two zones, the conscious and the unconscious. In fact, the latter is not unconscious. In man, the unconscious is the superconscious, the higher self, which is permanently in contact with the universal whole. The necessities of involution have constructed barriers which in every being separate, more or less firmly, the different levels of consciousness existing between the higher self and the physical consciousness. The true initiation, the true aim of esotericism, is to first render these barriers transparent and later eliminate them as barriers and re-establish the connection with the superconsciousness. The intellect, a helper or an obstacle. The intellect is the first problem the beginner has to face. Some esoteric schools say it is an obstacle for the initiatory path, but they use it anyways. The problem is that the knowledge and the methods which permit the penetration of the inner domain are transmitted and acquired through the channel of the intellect. This problem becomes a real hindrance when the intellect ceases to be a medium and instead becomes a goal or an end to itself. It should be clear that on the one hand, the language of the physical intellect which sustains the consciousness of this world is not the language of the superconscious. On the other hand, if we wish to begin a dialogue between these two levels of consciousness, we must rely on symbolism, which is the only thing that can cross the inner barriers at the beginning of the path. The principle of this dialogue is as follows. The intellect transmits or attempts to transmit mental images, such as it understands them on its own level, to the inner consciousness. The latter digests them and sends them back while also striving to transmit its own truth to the physical intellect of man. Thus, little by little, the effect of the inner barriers diminishes and they can become open borders which are crossed without a passport. This implies that the work should be done methodically. Conditions for esoteric work. A. The choice of the time. The best time for esoteric study is in the evening just before going to bed. When you cannot study, then mentally and silently review the previous studies. These should be the last thoughts of the day before you fall asleep. This is important because the moment of passage from the waking state to the sleeping state is the moment where the inner barriers partially move away in a physical, psychical sense. Conversely, when we wake up, the barriers rise in a physical, psychical sense. Do not think about the problems of the new day and try to remain in a mentally void state for a moment so you can receive the inner message. Note your physical interpretation of the message in a notebook and put the date on it. Note it down as soon as possible, otherwise this volatile knowledge evaporates and disappears. B. The notebook. From a practical point of view, it is useful to divide this notebook into 7 sections. The first section is dedicated from the period from Friday night to Saturday morning, the next section to the night of Saturday to Sunday, and so on. Each Friday night, meditate on the experiments of the first section of the book. Each Saturday night on the ones of the second section of the book, etc. You will notice that the knowledge written on the same nights, those of the same sections of the notebook, is complemented each week. Check and see if the experiments on the same nights of the week do not follow a lunar cycle. This point will be developed further later. We shall see then why the night of Friday to Saturday is the holy night, and consequently the first night of the esoteric week. C. The oratory. An oratory is very useful in esoteric work. It can be a small room, or a place in a room, or a closet, even a suitcase. This room only becomes an oratory at the moment of esoteric, inner and outer work. The mental attitude of the student creates the oratory. It is better to be alone to do the work that needs to be done. At the most, your mate can be present. No animal should be allowed in the oratory during the work, no matter what relationship you have to the pet. Animals have not passed the nadir initiation, and therefore, the cosmic pressure in them is the reverse of the one exerted on those who work esoterically. The occult forces of dogs particularly, and even more that of cats, which were used in Egyptian magic, can only bring trouble to those who do not master them. If the oratory is a room with multiple uses, the pet can be allowed in, but put outside during the hours of esoteric work. General principles of human and social behavior. The secret. At one time, there was a very intense watchfulness to make sure that the law of secrecy was enforced, as it was feared that personal initiation would shatter temporal power. There are still a number of erroneous ideas about the law of secrecy. The fact that its reality is so misunderstood is the source of the troubles of modern society. If the esoteric reality had actually been more widely distributed, it could either have given birth to a philosophy, religion, or it would have forced exoteric religions to reconsider their dogmas. In both cases, the compatibility of science and religion would have been greater, materialism less pronounced, and the current anxiety about life and death considerably diminished. This anxiety is the basis of many current problems. The law of secrecy is used by many pseudo-masters, gurus, and others as a means of hiding their ignorance, of giving themselves importance while remaining quiet about their very modest knowledge, or allowing people to believe that they are the only ones granted the authority to open or close the gate of the temple. This is the negative aspect of secrecy. We state that everything which can help, everything which leads to the gate of the temple can be and should be revealed to anyone who wishes to advance on the esoteric path. It is also understood that he should work, and in turn share the information with others, the secrets which were unveiled. Indeed, it is said, "Give and thou shalt receive." There is no problem created in revealing alchemical, Kabbalistic, or initiatory secrets, because they can only be used practically by those who have attained the proper inner state, that is, by whoever is already engaged on the path of wisdom. On the other hand, the inner experience, or that which the initiate finds behind the veil of the temple, should remain a secret. Everyone should find it on his own. It is indeed a supra-intellectual knowledge which can only be expressed by the word and not by human speech. An attempt to transmit our own inner revelations to another will burden him with a responsibility he may not be in a position to assume. Moving the veil of the temple for someone else demonstrates a lack of wisdom which definitely slows the author down on their own path. In summary, do not hide the processes which lead to knowledge, but keep very quiet about the nature of the experiments and experiences which result from the access to this knowledge. A similar rule can be observed in the profane world, where, without playing with the secret, discretion and reserve are often necessary for two very different reasons. First, in blindly entrusting people with our projects and intentions, we take the risk of triggering negative actions from those who would want to destroy us. We should therefore be watchful. Second, the fact of speaking about difficulties in work, finances, health, engages the power of the word. The problem then crystallizes, becomes fixed, more complex, and harder to resolve. Avoid giving them much force through speech or even through writing, which also has the same effect in this domain. Appetites. The adepts who have advanced on the esoteric path say that the heart of man vibrates on all levels and is thus a very significant guide. Love is the expression of the heart, not that of sexuality or sentimentality. Love is generosity and understanding in the help given to others. This does not mean we should attempt to make others happy following our own conception of their happiness. True generosity consists in respecting the freedom of others. On the subject of appetites, sexuality, food, and drink, the rule which applies here is no excess and no asceticism. Asceticism is to be avoided because it dries the body up and therefore makes it inaccessible to true spiritual energies. There can be times where you may wish to reduce the intake of food, but this is only for a certain period of time, and it is only necessary when you can really understand the mechanisms which justify this behavior. Sexuality is part of creation and therefore has a value and use beyond that of procreation. Without completely agreeing with the tantric point of view, which speaks of a purely sexual initiatory path which is not suitable to Westerners, we believe that a regular life as a couple can help in balancing of the inner energies. The opposite polarities of man and woman can be reciprocally balanced. The original man was androgynous, and this androgynous state is partially re-established in following the lifestyle of a normal physical couple. Let's point out that homosexual couples, male or female, are not to be considered as being on a path leading to androgyny. Asceticism can dry the heart and can also be a handicap on the path. However, a solitary life may not have any drawbacks if a sufficient mental generosity can vivify the heart. In all this, each should progressively find what suits him best, because there's probably a best solution for each one to find for themselves. Knowledge and freedom. The first great step on the esoteric path is made when you succeed in presenting yourself and knocking at the gate of the temple. But the gate only opens when the one who knocks is a free knower. Man can acquire different portions of knowledge which are not of the same nature nor of the same value. At the beginning of the study, this knowledge can be classified in two categories. The first is the knowledge resulting from the study of nature. This knowledge is real and does not change, if you study it in the right way. Alchemists call it the fixed knowledge. So also is the knowledge acquired through physics, chemistry, alchemy, astronomy, astrology, etc. In this domain, man cannot have any influence upon the laws he is learning. He can only use these laws if he obeys them. You can only dominate nature by obeying it. On the other hand, the second category of knowledge comes from human conventions such as civil laws, even though these strive to reflect the general principles of the equilibrium found in nature. This knowledge is transmitted through customs, social life, and even more so through religious dogmas. It is an artificial knowledge created by man and is modified by changes in society or religion. Ponder this. It is important to do so, because our superconscious cannot accept elements of knowledge that are contrary to the laws of nature. Human conventions do not concern the superconscious. Therefore, it is almost useless to attempt transmitting them, except for a small point of ethics. The point concerning our attitude toward the society we live in. Only the initiate is a free being. Physical freedom depends upon the society we live in and upon our position in the society. True liberation, however, is obtained through mental cleansing. During the course of ordinary life, many people renounce certain behaviors or satisfactions simply because they're obsessed by false values, which impregnate their physical consciousness. This impregnation is the result of social customs, religious dogmas, or even civil laws which have no relation to the principles of nature or the inner structure of man. We can thus observe many mental blocks. Each one must cleanse in himself all that which hinders the broadening of his point of view, his tolerance, and his generosity of heart. In no event should you fall in love with your own ideas. Compare the new with that which you already have, and choose what seems best. You should be willing to let go of old ideas. The egregores. We have serious reasons in insisting that each student work on acquiring the greatest possible mental freedom for himself in the physical world. Genuine initiation is a complete liberation. How can your higher self help you to liberate yourself if you don't do it for yourself in the realm already accessible to you? A second significant reason for insisting on this point is the subject of the egregores. What is an egregore? It is the psychic and astral entity of a group. All members of a group, a family, a club, a political party, a religion, or even a country are psychically included in the egregore of the organization to which they belong. Of course, each of us belongs to several egregores at once. Therefore, each individual who is involved in a group receives the influences of the egregores, that is, the astral counterpart of the group, in his psyche. This process is unconscious. The resulting drawbacks are, first, some perturbating psychic influences in the majority of cases, and second, a restriction of inner freedom. It is impossible to free oneself from certain egregores. For example, the egregores of the country you live in. However, we should free ourselves from all egregores which are not essential. An egregore actually grows by drawing support from the members which constitute it, who, in turn, through the repeated actions vivify it, somehow helping it to maintain its power. For a beginner, this is where the danger lies, all the more because of the tendency of man to seek protection, the price of which is often a loss of freedom. We should emphasize here that the association, the philosophers of nature, does not perform any group ritual in order to reduce the influence of its egregore to a minimum. Be cautious. The eternal wisdom is such that we are born where things are best for our evolution, contrary to what it sometimes may seem. And therefore, mental freedom should not transform us into dropouts or misfits. It should simply open the freedom of the inner path while liberating us from unnecessary obstacles. Positive thinking. An element which is also very important for success on the esoteric path is the elimination of the negativity of the mind. Strive to see the positive side of things, to a priori grant the positive part. After studying and pondering a question, form your point of view. Be aware of its negative aspect, but first strive to see its positive side, however weak it may be. We'll examine in Lesson 5 the influence of the word. As we know that man's speech is in relation to, in resonance with the word, we should avoid words or sentences of a negative connotation or quality. Rather than directly affirming the negative aspect of a thing, it is better to positively express the reverse of its negative characteristic. For example, if by the word you wish to influence the weather, do not formulate it as, "I wish for the rain," as most people consider the rain, consciously and unconsciously, a hindrance, but rather ask that the earth may receive the water that it needs to satisfy its hunger and thirst. In the same sphere of mind influence, if you do not at first feel well inclined toward an individual, attempt a contact first to verify if a harmony can be established or not. In the same way, when an idea or a project is presented, Do not refuse it immediately. Always grant yourself time to think of it, to meditate before you give your response, and examine both aspects well, the positive and the negative, but always start with the positive. Work in the oratory. General principles. We have already spoken about some aspects of the oratory and shall now complete the discussion of this subject in view of what we need to accomplish during this class. The setup. It is best to put a room aside solely for this purpose. 6 foot by 6 foot is enough. This is not essential, however. Preferably a small wooden altar, otherwise a small table. Any other support is fine. A comfortable chair or an armchair. A mirror in which you can see your head and chest. 2 candle holders. An incense burner. Binder divided into sections. Means of regulating the light, electrical or solar. Sound insulation as best as you can. Comfortable temperature and sufficient ventilation. Preparation before you enter the oratory. Cleanse yourself with water. Take a shower and meditate on the water cleansing your body. Put clean clothes on. Drink a glass of water. Mens sana in corpore sano. Rules to be applied in the oratory. A. Intellectual work. Study the lessons. Repeat the exercises. Take notes. Always read the proposed exercise completely before doing it. The altar can be used as a support to write upon if you do not have any other support available. Normal lighting. You can also burn some incense. B. Esoteric work. Weak or no electrical light. Burn both candles. Burn incense. Sit comfortably. Take the hieratic position. Torso vertical, hands on thighs, thighs parted, feet flat on the ground, slightly parted. Number 1. Breathing. For a minute or two, perform the square breathing exercise. A. Lungs empty, breathe in for 5 seconds. B. Stop for 5 seconds. C. Breathe out for 5 seconds. D. Stop for 5 seconds. First, do not go beyond 4 or 5 seconds in each phase. Stop immediately if any pain or discomfort occurs. 2. Strive to be mentally calm and to concentrate on the fact that you are then to listen to the higher self. 3. Perform the work or the exercise you choose, and especially take notes at the end of the oratory session, because it is impossible to do all the exercises in one session. 4. At each session, A. Be positive. B. Think on your own so you can reach a greater freedom of thought away from all egregores. C. Open your heart and listen to it. D. Meditate according to the influences of the day in the notebook of the experiments. E. Attempt to obtain a mental void. When your mind is blank, you do not think anymore. F. Choose a gesture or a sentence which means that the work is finished. Take note of the sign you choose and do not change it for a period of time. Proposed exercise. Concentrating on a checkerboard. Find a checkerboard, preferably one of 8 by 8 squares with black and white squares. Place it horizontally in front of you, and place the burning candles on both sides. Fix your gaze on the checkerboard. This does not necessarily happen on the first session, but the checkerboard progressively takes on a uniform color. The squares tend to disappear. The white squares stand for the active energy, the black for the passive energy. The uniform color is the result of a balance of the two. The exercise, when successfully completed, contributes to the rebalancing of these energies in us. Close the session with the sign you chose. This lesson may seem long and scattered, however, it seems essential to provide, right at the beginning, all the information which can help you comprehend the appropriate state of mind required to perform successful esoteric work. Ora et labora.